Hi, my name is Keyack, and welcome to this live demonstration of Bill of Material Compare by CMK BIM Consulting. Today we're going to demonstrate things in three basic steps. First, we're going to export the bill of materials from Tekla Structures. And what's interesting is that if you actually use the same formatted report, you can export bill of materials from SDS2, Revit, or even Advanced Steel if you'd like to. Then the next step here is that I'm going to actually bring those bill of material reports, which are just CSV files or comma delimited files, into bill of material compare, and we're actually going to compare and find the changes of new, modified, and deleted parts automatically. And then the last step is we're going to bring this back into the Tekla Structures model, and we're going to be able to visualize the new and modified parts and be able to see exactly where in the model things have changed. Now the very first step is here within Tekla Structures. I'm going to launch the Bill Material Compare for Tekla tool, and when we launch this, we'll see here that we have the actual ability to change where the Bill Material projects are stored, so we can actually browse to that, but by default it goes into our Documents folder and a subfolder called Bill of Material Compare. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create a new job number here, so I'll just type in 2000 and I'll just say load, and that actually creates a brand new job folder for this. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to simply just select all of the steel in the model that I want to include in this bill of material export, and so then I'll just press this button here, and then let's actually go into that bill of material compare folder and then job number 2000, and I'll just call this original bill of material as the export name, and then it's just a comma delimited file, and we'll save that. And then that report file gets output and opened up with Excel here, and you can see that there's just a unique identifier and then these common properties here that we care about from an advanced bill of material or a parts list. So we've got the piece marks, an ABM mark, we've got the profile, material grade, and all the just basic information that we need there. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and close this down. And then what we're going to do is we're going to actually move over to the standalone version of Bill of Material Compare, where we can actually import that Bill of Material and add comments and references to it. So this is the part where we're just exporting the information from the detailing software, but now we're going to migrate over to the standalone version of Bill of Material Compare. Now let's go ahead and launch the standalone desktop application here, and we can see that we've got job number 2000, and we can select that and press load, so that way we're currently active in that directory. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to press the original bill of material button, and I'm going to browse into that 2000 job folder and see that CSV that we exported from Tekla Structures. So I'll just go ahead and open that, and now it has been imported here in to the bill of material compare project. Now here's what's really great is if you don't have a robust material management or production control software like Fab Suite or FabTrol as an example, then basically what you can do here is at a very basic level, you can actually add references in here. So if for some reason you wanted to keep track of your purchase orders, like if you're the project manager or the purchasing agent for a fabricator, and you just want to keep track of a PO or mill order reference or something like that, you can actually select that in here and apply that. So I'm just going to go ahead and say Control A and select all the rows. And then what I can do is I can just go ahead and put in on the reference field, I'm just going to go ahead and say, for instance, mill order number 001. And then I'll just go ahead and apply that reference there. Now you could also add comments too, but I like to leave the comment field sort of open for the detailer. So the detailer could have actually put in a comment on the user defined attribute in the model and told me that this was ABM Rev 0 or something like that. But you could technically apply also some comments here if you'd like to. So if you want that to be something that you apply, you can say Control All, and then you could say ABM, and then just say Rev 0 as an example. And then you just say comment on all those, and everything's there. You can also change the ABM mark if you'd like to. So if the detailer did not set the preliminary mark attribute, you can actually come in here and select these and then enter in a value, and then it will apply that ABM mark to all those parts if you'd like to. Also, if in the CSV file you wanted like a sequential number that Excel does pretty good, you could have done that before importing that in and applying that ABM mark if the detailer has not done that. So there you go. So those are some of the basic things that you can do just using this app to sort of keep track of different things that you're doing. Again, the reference could be a mill order. It might even be actually some of your nesting references. It might be a purchase order. And this doesn't have to be limited to advanced bills. This could actually be a parts list as well. And if you're subletting some of your parts out for galvanizing or getting a separate fabricator that's actually fabricating your parts and then bringing those in, you can easily reference that information here. Now, one other thing that you can do is if you actually go to the Changes tab, there's the ability to get a quantities report. So the listing here is basically every line item, so every individual stick or part in the model. But if I actually want to get a quantities report, I can come over here and say export quantities to CSV. So in that 2000 folder, I'm just going to say bill of material with quantity, and that might be my Rev 0 there, and then I'll just save that, and then that opens up. Now, what this does is it actually tells me, it's used for a couple purposes. This is also like kind of a change management report between two different versions of bill of material to show you if there's a quantity change. In this case, since this is the first time in just the original, it's just showing a summary of each of the different ID marks here or piece marks. So you can, what ID mark just means is it's either the preliminary mark if it's an advanced bill or the actual piece mark if you're looking at a detailed bill of material. But the whole idea here is that it's just basically telling you that this is a total summary of each of those marks, and then you can actually use this as a tracker for your purchase order or your mill order request, whatever you'd like to do. So this is a neat little thing of getting a summary report versus just having an individual line item report. All right, so now let's go ahead and say that we're going to do some revisions. So I might grab these beams here, and then we'll go ahead and use another tool that we have here at CMK BIM Consulting called FastBeam. And I'm just going to quickly modify those to W21 by 44s. And then maybe even here on these beams, I'm just going to change the beam size here to be a little bit smaller beams. So let's go with W12 by 14. Now I'm going to go ahead and redraw that there, and then let's delete some pieces out. So let's say that these pieces are deleted, and then let's say over here we actually need to create some additional copies. So now we're going to technically get some new steel. Let's do one last revision here where we're just grabbing this steel and we're shortening some beams, and then we're technically not really modifying anything from a material point of view on these girders or supporting pieces. So I'm just going to move this, and let's stretch this another 4 feet as an example. And now we've got a pretty decent amount of revisions here on the building. Let's go ahead and just update our numbering. So I'm going to say modify numbering. I'm going to select all the steel in the model, and I'm going to go ahead and say save preliminary numbers. So that again takes the current piece mark in Tekla Structures after the numbering, and it assigns it to that user defined attribute for the ABM mark or the preliminary mark. And we're going to go ahead and reference that in our modified or our updated bill of material export. Now, let's say that there was a change order or an addendum that was associated to those revisions. So I'm going to try to remember here all the different pieces that I actually modified. So I believe a lot of steel here that I was touching got modified, and then we even have some new steel here. So let's just go ahead and grab these. There we go. So I think I've caught everything there that did technically change. And so this is again is part of that issue, is that if you're doing things manually, then you gotta have to kind of keep track of that. So the one thing I do want to do is I want to just go ahead and open up the user defined attributes for this. So let's just scroll down here and open up the user attributes. We'll uncheck this, and I'm going to go to the comment field, and I'm actually going to put in here that this is change order -001 as an example. So I'm referencing to the purchasing agent, the lead detailer, or the fabrication project manager. Hey, we did some changes here in the model, and I want you to see a traceability or a trail of what this change was tied to and why. And that's especially important for billing purposes and making change orders. So I'm going to go ahead and modify that and set that. I think I've caught everything here, and I'm referencing that. Now the detailed piece or the deleted pieces aren't going to necessarily be able to reference or show that, and so we'll see that when we actually do the comparison report here in a minute. All right, so let's go ahead and save that, and then let's export the updated bill of material. So we've got the tool that's now open. We're going to select all of the objects, and then we're going to run the export here. And I'm just going to say export this as the current bill of material. So you can call this Rev 1 or Rev 2, whatever it is, or even tie it to a change order, whatever makes sense based on your fabricator standards for communicating the file. So I'm just going to go ahead and save this. And then now we've got that exported. And what's really neat is that when you look at this, you see that for the revised pieces, there is that change order reference. Now, you don't have to have this. This is just something that's kind of a nice thing to have to communicate with the fabricator and project manager, but the tool will automatically identify the changes. So this just gives traceability if you do want to use this in your work process. Now that we've got that exported, we're going to actually go open up the standalone version again, which doesn't require Tekla structures, and we're going to do the comparison, and then we're going to go ahead and see that comment history tells us that we need to handle or deal with those revisions and changes. Alright, so when we come back in here to the standalone version of Bill of Material Compare, we're going to go to the Current tab, and we're going to press the Current Bill of Material button. We're going to go browse to that new or updated Bill of Material report, press Open, and then we'll import that in. And we can actually see here that I can easily see that there's some change order number 1 parts here. And if I wanted to, I could actually filter by that. So we just enter that in here, press enter or search, and then it shows all the parts that have that change order 1 comments on it. That just clues me into kind of the level of revisions and things that have happened and what the detailers told me. Now again, we don't have to depend on that, especially because deleted parts aren't going to be tagged with that. And so what I'm going to do next is, I go back to the original tab here, and we can see that we added that mill order reference or that purchase order number as well as a Rev 0. Now one thing that you might want to do is before you actually proceed is we need to get that information copied across because the detailer didn't actually import or bring that back into their model. So the quickest way to do that is actually I'll select everything in the list here, so I'll just do a Control A, and then that way everything's highlighted. And then what we're going to do is we're going to press this copy button. And so what that does is it goes and looks for any line items that have the same GUID or ID as in the original bill of material, and then it will actually copy the reference and comment across. The exception to that is if the comment has actually already been filled in on the current bill of material, then it will actually ignore the original and leave the current comment in here. So this is really handy. This is actually great. Now I can override this. I can either leave this in here or I could put ABM Rev 1 or whatever I want to. But from a traceability point of view, I'll probably leave the change order number in here. Now if I scroll down, it looks like everything is pretty good from a reference point of view. Everything copied across except for we have some new steel. So these are some new GUIDs or new IDs or new parts that were physically added in the model that did not have an original reference. So I'd probably would actually call this mill order reference number 2. So I've got that actually filled in here, and we would just press reference, and then now that just shows me that I actually have to go make a totally new order of material or a new purchase order, etc. So once we make any of these changes and copy this, we want to make sure we press the save button so it remembers our nodes. Now the very next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do a quantity comparison report. So if I go to the changes here, now that I've got the original and the current bill of material, I'm just going to press this button here and I'm going to export a new quantities report, and I'm just going to call this Rev 0 or Rev 1. So we'll go ahead and save that, press save, and then we'll take a look at that. Now what this shows us is that it actually will identify here that there are some revisions that have happened. So here we can see whenever this changed is true, it's just telling me that an existing ABM or an existing piece mark has where there is a quantity that's actually changed. So here this went from 12 to 16. We can see that there's actually some new parts because the quantity is 0 here, so there's some new ABM marked pieces, and those items have been added. And then now one thing that's interesting at the bottom is that it's telling us that B6 and B7 actually had some issues in the sense that there were parts that are actually in the ABM and the itemized list that have different marks or some sort of different properties that have been compared here during the comparison. And so that's handy for me to actually go back to the individual line item list and just see, did maybe an ABM mark forget to get changed by the detailer? And I just want to double check and see what is different between the actual line item parts of all the different B6s and identify that and make sure that there's no issues. So this report is extremely handy for a purchasing agent or a project manager to quickly start to make assessments on how their material quantities and what they've ordered or planned with the mill or with a service center, exactly what they're going to be needing on the project. And by automatically getting this, they can jump on this and make changes much more quickly versus catching this late and having to deal with long lead items or late material changes, which can increase costs. Now it's time to actually do a comparison and look at the changes. And there's two options here. The very first thing is, do you want this to be an ABM compare only, where it's really looking at the ABM mark, the length, profile, material grade, as well as the sequence, and it's just determining whether or not those properties have changed. So it ignores locational or movement differences like grid and elevation references. The other thing that's special about ABMs oftentimes is on length. So some purchasing agents will deal with a length overrun and length underrun based on what they originally ordered. Oftentimes in the US, you'll see that if the material got shorter by, let's say, if it only got shorter by less than a foot, then I'm going to ignore that. And that's what this less than one here is. And then the greater is decimal feet. So if something got longer than more, say, like an eighth of an inch or a quarter of an inch, then I'm going to actually need to adjust my list, especially if I'm getting things cut to length or I don't have a lot of extra drop built into my mill order. And so that's what you can control here. So if you choose this, it's going to only compare that and use this length underrun and overrun. If you don't, then it's going to do a detailed comparison and it will consider location and elevation in those grid references as part of the changes here. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. I'm going to simply press the compare button, and now within seconds I get an automatic list that tells me deleted, new, and modified. So this is an itemized list. The revision report that we were looking at just a second ago is actually a quantities list. So that's looking at piece mark quantity comparisons of like what quantities changed or if there's new quantities. This is actually comparing the GUID or the unique ID of each part in the model between the original list and the current list, and it's telling you those changes. So deleted means that it's completely gone, and we can see here that it actually didn't get caught in the comment field here, so because those items weren't there. Now it looks like I also missed the comment here for the change order 1 on these new objects as well in the list. Now, one thing that I do see here is that I've got some modified parts. And the way this works is if I just simply double click on that, it's actually going to highlight and show me what the properties are that have changed. So I can see that the piece marks changed, the comment has been changed versus what was originally there, and that's most likely because of the change order, which we can see the previous and the new value. And then we can also see here that there is the ABM mark that's changed, and then the weight has changed a little bit, and that's because of the profile. So when you do the detailed comparison versus the ABM comparison, it just shows you a lot more properties that are being compared and considered, whereas the ABM is mainly just looking for profile changes that are going to cause you to need to change your material order. Alright, so once we've got these set here, then all we really need to do is we're just going to go ahead and press the save button. And what happens is this stores an XML file that's inside of the project directory that we can then use to see those changes visually in the model. Before we hop over to the model, I do want to show you that you can actually export this report, especially if you don't have Tekla structures or you're bringing in these reports from other modeling or detailing softwares. So you can just select all the rows of the changes here, and then what we'll do is we're just going to go ahead and say export to CSV. And so we can say changes report, and then just hit save, and then that'll open up in Excel, and then you can see here that you've actually got all of the detailed line items telling you all the changes, and then of course there's the grid and elevation references which you can tie back to a design drawing. So this might be a great attachment that you can use in your change order write-up, and that you can cross-reference back to design drawings or even mark up a set of 2D drawings if you don't have access to the 3D model. Now back here within Tekla structures, we're going to open up the bill of material compare for Tekla. We're going to see now that the changes are loaded up here in the list. So the UI is a little bit different. We're only seeing the changes versus the actual bill of materials here. And so what we're going to do is we can see that the model's actually been colorized, showing the changes. So orange means modified, and then green is the new steel. Now the red deleted steel doesn't appear here because we actually physically deleted those parts out. Some detailers will actually leave that steel in the model and they just put filters on it, so that way they don't include it or make drawings from it in the future, but they'll remove the connections and they'll just leave the main sticks there, so that way they can actually have a reference of that deleted steel. If those deleted objects are in the model, they'll actually turn red. But in this case, I completely deleted them out, so I don't actually see them here physically in the model. Now, what's great is that the list is interactive with the model. So if I double click on this, it's actually going to zoom me to and highlight to that specific location of that part. And then if I do this here, I can actually select multiple parts and it highlights a whole area. Now this also works in reverse. If we just grab this steel here and then we just say let's filter the list, basically what it does is it filters the list to the selected objects in the model. And then again, if I double click, it'll highlight those specific entities so I can see what they are. And so now I have an interaction of the actual change here in the list view, but I can actually interact and see that in the model. Now if we want to get back, we'll just say let's show the whole entire model here. And if for some reason, if you accidentally redraw, this is just temporary graphics, it's not using object representation, so you just press the redraw and it's going to quickly put the colors back in there for you. And the reason why we've kind of done it this way is that if you do want to have object representation loaded at the same time while you're looking at the changes, you can always redraw, quickly look at that, and then if you need to get back to the colors, then you just press this button and you're good to go. Now the last thing that we're going to show here is that you might want to actually permanently store these attributes to the user-defined attributes in the model, especially if you want to reference this on shop drawings or something like that. So what I can do, or make even a report that's customized here out of Tekla. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to select all of the rows here, so that way we get all of these items, and then I'm just going to go ahead and go to the settings option, which allows us to control which attributes are imported. Now I've been controlling the ABM marks pretty well myself, so I don't really want to take, and the purchasing agent didn't really change that, so I don't really want to import that back in. But the status of the changes, the comment like that the fabricator purchasing agent did in the standalone tool, I might want to bring that back. And then also here the reference that's been associated to the mill order numbers or the purchasing order numbers, I can bring that back into Tekla as well. So by these being checked, I can control that. And then these are the different user defined attribute variable names that are defined in the objects IMP that will allow me to do that. All right, so now that I've got that set, what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and say let's save those changes to the model. It then will write and select all those objects, and then if we just minimize this here, go to user defined attributes, we should be able to see that there's the modified status, there's the mill order reference, as well as the change order comment that came from that changes list. And there you go. That's a summary of the entire process here of exporting your bill of materials, then doing an automated change comparison between those bill of materials and those changes, and then actually visualizing and seeing that back here in the model. If you're interested in getting a copy of Bill of Material Compare, just contact us at CMK BIM Consulting at the email or the phone number shown to the right.